Okay, tonight, we're standing on a lonely shoreline where the ocean whispers against the sand and silence covers secrets buried beneath. The wind cuts cold through the dunes, but colder still is the knowledge that someone once hunted here, leaving behind victims who could no longer speak. Gilgo Beach, Long Island, is not just a beach, it is a graveyard carved by human hands. Welcome to Criminal Mindcast, the podcast where we tell true crime stories not just with facts but with silence, with the haunting weight of what was never said. Each case we explore is a reminder that evil rarely announces itself. It moves quietly, threading itself into the ordinary and waits for us to notice too late. Here we confront the shadows left behind. Tonight, we unravel the chilling enigma of the Long Island serial killer, a case that has baffled investigators for over a decade. Along this isolated beach, lives were taken, families shattered, and questions left to rot like driftwood in the tide. This is not simply about murder. It is about a predator, a community, and the uneasy truth of how fragile safety really is. Long Island stretches out like a thin arm reaching into the Atlantic. Its towns a mix of quiet suburban streets, seasonal tourism, and corners where loneliness thrives. Beneath the calm surface lies a history of fractured families, economic strain, and people caught in cycles of vulnerability. It was here the Gilgo Beach murders began. The victims were not faceless statistics, though the world often treated them as such. They were women with names, families, and unfinished stories. Many were in their 20s, living precarious lives shaped by financial strain, broken trust, or isolation. They turned to escort work or online ads, not out of recklessness but survival, stepping into risky encounters because no safer path remained. Each woman bore a quiet dignity, even as society condemned their choices while giving them little safety. They were more than labels, daughters, sisters, and mothers bound by love and struggle. Their lives did not end in frenzy, but in silence carefully engineered by a predator who saw them as disposable. Yet to their families, they remain irreplaceable. Empty chairs at tables, unanswered calls, and birthdays that arrive without them. Their absence lingers, a wound that neither time nor justice has yet been able to close. The first signs of danger appeared quietly, with absence, not violence. Phones went unanswered, apartments fell silent, footsteps never returned. Reports of missing women were often dismissed, police slow to connect the pattern, vulnerable young women vanishing one by one. Their invisibility to society became the predator's opportunity. Psychologically, such predators act with discipline, not impulse. They exploit opportunity, but within carefully chosen limits, targeting women whose absence would stir little alarm. This paradox shaped the Gilgo case. The same invisibility that muted society's concern became the beacon that drew the killer's gaze, turning neglect into the very stage for his predation. The planning suggested control. The consistency revealed obsession. From these details, a profile emerges. A man embedded in suburban life, possibly with family, possibly respected, but driven by a void. He compartmentalized his urges, hiding behind the mask of normality. Many offenders grow from childhoods of neglect, authoritarianism, or humiliation. If this killer emerged from such roots, intimacy would have felt threatening, affection unsafe. Control became his substitute for love. Domination replaced connection. The choice of Gilgo Beach carried symbolic weight. The shoreline is a threshold between permanence and erasure. Sand swallows footprints, tides erase evidence, nature conspires with secrecy. To leave bodies here was ritual, not randomness. It turned the beach into theater, a stage for concealment. Philosophy deepens this portrait. Buddhism teaches suffering arises from craving. His craving was not for affection but for domination, an insatiable compulsion. Each victim may have reflected back his vulnerability, fear of rejection, weakness, or intimacy, and by silencing them he silenced himself. Stoicism, by contrast, preaches rational mastery of desire and compassion for others. He embodied its inversion, discipline without virtue, order serving chaos. The women's lives add another dimension. Some had children who still wait for answers. Others lived estranged from families, surviving at the margins. Their tragedy was not only in their deaths, but in the collapse of support that left them exposed. The killer exploited both individual fragility and society's neglect. His profile sharpened further, a man skilled with technology, arranging meetings by burner phones and online ads. Patient, confident, and aware of police blind spots, he rehearsed his routines carefully. He balanced a dual identity, community member in daylight, predator in darkness. Such duplicity is common in offenders. Neighbors might remember him as polite, quiet, unremarkable. Perhaps he attended barbecues, waved to children, paid taxes. Yet behind closed doors, secrecy fed hunger. Psychological research shows urges intensify in silence. If fantasies began in adolescence, years of secrecy would only amplify them until acting became inevitable. Patterns in body disposal underscored ritual. Victims were found close together, suggesting a comfort zone. Criminology calls this a signature of predators who know their terrain and manage risk. Gilgo Beach was not only convenient, it was sanctuary. The case is also about systemic blindness. Law enforcement often dismissed missing women whose lifestyles did not match conventional innocence. Prejudice became camouflage, giving him time. He chose victims least likely to be believed or searched for, and society's indifference protected him. Confucian thought emphasizes duty within relationships as the foundation of harmony. The killer inverted this completely. He turned trust into traps, protection into violation, community into betrayal. His crimes were not only against individuals, but against the very fabric of society. As evidence accumulated, burner phones, missing women, bodies along dunes, one realization hardened. This was not recklessness, but rehearsal. His actions were disciplined, patterned, and chillingly consistent. What haunted investigators was not only the brutality, but the realization that such cruelty thrived inside ordinary life, hidden in plain sight. The characters of this story divide into two groups. On one side, the women, human beings whose names and lives demand remembrance beyond headlines. On the other, the unseen predator, identity still obscured but psychological fingerprints left behind. Together they form the dark equation of Gilgo Beach. Looking deeper, the Gilgo Beach murders are not only about crime, but about the fractures they reveal in society. Vulnerability became opportunity, silence became cover. These women were not invisible in life, but systemic blindness made them seem so, allowing a predator to hunt where others refused to look. The killer understood this imbalance. He chose victims the world overlooked, and he exploited that neglect with patience sharpened into ritual. Each disappearance was not sudden chaos but careful orchestration, woven into the ordinary rhythm of suburban life. Their paths and his hunger converged on a strip of sand where the ocean erases footprints and memory alike. Gilgo Beach became more than shoreline. It became a graveyard and a riddle, a place where absence speaks louder than presence. The story begins not with screams but with silence, and it is that silence which still echoes. The Gilgo Beach murders did not begin with screams or public spectacle. Their timeline opened with silence as women vanished from ordinary nights. Each disappearance carried the same quiet ritual. A woman was last seen alive, often leaving home or answering a call. Hours later, she was gone. Days became weeks and absence became the only trace. In December 2010, police searched for Shannon Gilbert, a young woman reported missing after running from a client's house in Oak Beach. She made a frantic 911 call, repeating that someone was after her before disappearing into the marsh. The search for her led to a chilling discovery. 4 other bodies buried in the brush along Gilgo Beach. The remains belonged to women with striking similarities. All were sex workers who used online platforms to find clients. All vanished within a short window of time. Each body was wrapped in burlap, concealed but not destroyed, as if the killer wanted them found, but only after nature had done its work. What began as one missing person case became a serial murder investigation. Police widened the search and uncovered more remains in the following months, including partial bodies scattered in nearby areas. This raised a disturbing question. Were all victims the work of one killer, or had Gilgo Beach become a dumping ground for multiple predators? The timeline of disappearance sharpened the mystery. Melissa Barthélemy was last seen in July 2009. Megan Waterman vanished in June 2010. Maureen Brainerd Barnes disappeared in July 2007. Amber Lynn Costello was last seen in September 2010. Their bodies surfaced together in December 2010, as if their deaths were chapters in one devastating book. Clues revealed strange behavior. After Melissa's death, her phone was used to taunt her family. A cold male voice called her younger sister, mocking her grief. This intrusion extended the crime beyond physical murder into psychological torment. It revealed a killer who dominated not only bodies but emotions. Other cases showed eerie interruptions. Cars were abandoned, clothing left behind, personal items untouched. The vanishings were sudden, with lives left mid-sentence. Investigators noted how quickly these women seemed to evaporate, with no sign of struggle. The emptiness was too precise to be coincidence. The rhythm of the crimes also puzzled investigators. Some women disappeared within days of each other, while others vanished years apart. Did the killer pause, or was he active but unnoticed? In criminology, such pauses are deceptive. Predators may stop due to fear of exposure, personal obligations, or to heighten the pressure before striking again. One chilling twist lay in the victim's condition. Many were wrapped as if packaged rather than discarded. Burlap preserved anonymity and delayed decay, but it also carried symbolism. The care and disposal suggested ritual, a signature inconsistent with random violence. Additional remains complicated the narrative. Among the dead were men, a toddler, and dismembered parts linked to earlier disappearances. These did not match the profile of the first four. Was this the work of one killer evolving, or had the beach become a shared dumping ground for multiple offenders exploiting its isolation? Geography tied the crimes together. The bodies lay along Ocean Parkway, a road parallel to the beach. Secluded but accessible, shielded by brush yet minutes from suburban homes, the site was ideal for concealment. The killer understood the terrain well and trusted it to protect his secrets until chance uncovered them. Technology also threaded through the timeline. Cell phone records placed victims near certain neighborhoods before they vanished. The killer used burner phones to arrange meetings, a sign of caution and awareness of surveillance. Yet he also risked calling families, a contradiction that suggested arrogance, or a thrill in inserting himself into their grief. The haunting truth is that the timeline remains incomplete. We do not know how many women vanished unseen, how many nights ended with a drive into darkness that never returned. What we know may be only the visible edge of a longer sequence stretching further back, or continuing after the last known disappearance. Typically, investigators track escalation in such cases. Intervals shrink, mistakes increase, compulsion overwhelms control. But in Gilgo Beach, the opposite emerged. The killer displayed restraint, sticking to his method and leaving little trace. His discipline made the timeline harder to decode. Neighbors recalled odd sights, cars parked where none should be, strangers walking near the marsh, lights flashing at odd hours. At the time, nothing seemed alarming. In hindsight, these fragments became threads in the web, signs of a predator moving under cover of routine. Despite the bodies and the mapped timelines, the killer's identity stayed hidden. No camera ever caught his face, no database preserved his fingerprints. What lingered was only a taunting voice over a phone, mocking a grieving family. In the end, the Gilgo murders closed not with an arrest, but with silence that endures. From a criminological lens, the Gilgo timeline is a paradox, visible in its chilling patterns, invisible in its perpetrator. The sequence of events can be mapped with precision, but the man behind them remains a shadow. Facts align, yet meaning slips away. Some have turned to philosophy to describe the void. In Christian theology, evil is the absence of love, empathy, or God. In Gilgo Beach, each vanishing was an act of subtraction, a life erased, a family fractured, a presence stolen. The chronology became not a story of events but of voids, nights ending without return. As years passed, the timeline did not close. Investigators revisited evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and searched again. Each discovery added questions rather than closure. The murders became less a line of events than a spiral of silence. Thus, the crime details refused to resolve into clarity. The women disappeared in ordinary nights. Their belongings remained, Their bodies were hidden with ritual care. The killer moved between caution and arrogance, calculation and taunting. The timeline spans over a decade, yet its final chapter is still unwritten. Gilgo Beach waits, its secrets buried in sand and silence. The Gilgo Beach investigation began with hesitation, not urgency. At first, police saw the disappearances as separate cases, influenced by prejudice against sex workers, whose lives were seen as risky cases were opened but rarely pursued, as though their worth carried less weight. That changed in December 2010, when 4 bodies were found together, exposing a chilling pattern. Detectives scoured the shoreline with cadaver dogs, mapped coordinates and sifted through brush and sand. Yet years of neglect had already dulled evidence that might once have illuminated the truth. Mishandling became a lasting criticism. Shannon Gilbert US 911 call, her desperate pleas that someone was chasing her, was not pursued with the gravity it deserved. More than a year passed before her body was recovered from the marsh near Oak Beach. By then, questions clouded whether her death was linked to the others or dismissed as accident. This uncertainty deepened the fracture between families and law enforcement. Relatives demanded accountability, asking why their loved ones' disappearances had been neglected for so long. For them, the failures were not abstract errors but wounds. Every delayed search, every ignored lead was a reminder that justice had been rationed unequally. The media amplified those failures. Headlines declared the emergence of a Long Island serial killer. National outlets broadcast images of crime scene tents against grey skies, while local journalists swarmed the community. The case fed on both horror and fascination. Each new discovery staged a spectacle, each rumor inflated into potential truth. The frenzy cut both ways. On one hand, it pressured police to commit resources. On the other, it created noise that clouded judgment. Theories multiplied in tabloids and talk shows, perhaps multiple killers, perhaps police corruption. The line between fact and speculation blurred quickly. For investigators, this scrutiny became constant. Every move was dissected, every statement challenged. Yet transparency remained scarce. Police released minimal information, citing protection of the case, but silence only fueled suspicion. Families feeling abandoned accused authorities of hiding incompetence. Trust between community and investigators steadily withered. Conflicting theories worsened the confusion. Some detectives believed one killer was responsible for all the bodies. Others pointed to differences in victim profiles and disposal methods, suggesting multiple offenders. Was Gilgo Beach the hunting ground of one predator, or a dumping ground for several? Even within task forces, consensus proved elusive. The contradictions shaped public reaction. In neighborhoods near the beach, fear spread like fog. Residents locked doors, eyed strangers suspiciously, and wondered if the killer was one of their neighbors. Suburban streets, once symbols of safety, now seemed like hiding places for a predator who could walk among them unnoticed. Families became reluctant advocates. They organized vigils, demanded meetings with officials, and worked to keep media attention alive when police momentum waned. For them, the case was not only about solving a mystery, but restoring dignity to their daughters and sisters. Each public plea was both mourning and protest. The longer the case dragged on, the more it exposed systemic flaws. Evidence mishandled or lost, witnesses dismissed, leads ignored. Critics argued that class bias and prejudice against sex workers shaped these failures. Evidence mishandled or lost, witnesses dismissed, leads ignored. Critics argued that class bias and prejudice against sex workers shaped these failures. When society devalues certain lives, justice follows unequally. The Gilgo investigation reflected that uncomfortable truth. Criminologists call this the burden of missed opportunity. Every uncollected clue becomes a ghost, every delay a shadow. At Gilgo Beach, the investigation gathered such shadows, leaving detectives piecing together fragments while knowing that stronger choices in the past might have illuminated the path forward. Meanwhile, the media built its own narrative. Documentaries, true crime shows, and podcasts dissected the case. Journalists interviewed neighbors, analyzed phone records, speculated on suspects. Public consumption turned tragedy into entertainment, blurring empathy with voyeurism. Victims risked being remembered less for who they were than for how they died. This spectacle raised ethical questions. In Buddhist thought, suffering should inspire compassion, not consumption. Yet here grief was recycled into content. Families, while grateful for attention, often expressed exhaustion. Their mourning became public property, scrutinized by strangers who knew only fragments. Over the years, police named suspects, but none were charged. Each leak through the press stirred hope, then collapsed into disappointment. The public began to view the case as an endless cycle: discovery, lead, stall, silence. Suspense hardened into stagnation. The contradictions soon became metaphors for deeper distrust. Police asked for patience, but offered little clarity. Families sought transparency, but received bureaucracy. Citizens wanted safety, but saw no arrest. The vacuum of resolution created fertile ground for conspiracy theories, each more elaborate than the last. From a Stoic lens, such uncertainty is corrosive. Grief can be endured if it is named and faced, but the absence of truth gnaws endlessly. The Gilgo Beach families remained suspended between hope and despair, unable to bury not just bodies, but questions. Despite task forces, FBI involvement, and renewed searches, results stayed thin. The shoreline was combed repeatedly, new forensic technologies applied to old evidence. Yet the killer's identity remained hidden, as though he had buried not only bodies but himself, disappearing into the anonymity of suburban life. Public reaction gradually shifted. Fear gave way to frustration with the system. Neighbors who once whispered about shadows began speaking openly about police failures. Families demanded federal oversight. The investigation, meant to restore confidence, instead became a symbol of institutional inadequacy. The case was not just unsolved, it was mishandled. Though media frenzy slowed, the story never faded. Each anniversary renewed interest. Each unsolved year reminded the public how fragile justice can be. The case remained suspended between fragments of evidence and the inability to assemble them. In that limbo, the killer's silence grew louder than the voices demanding answers. The public reaction to Gilgo Beach underscores a universal truth. Unsolved mysteries are not just puzzles, but wounds. They erode trust, distort memory, and allow fear to linger. The investigation was both pursuit of justice and mirror of prejudice, error, and the limits of certainty. But faith in resolution had already closed. To enter the mind of the Gilgo Beach killer is to step into a chamber ruled not by noise but by silence. What emerges is not chaos but ritual, not sudden rage but careful calculation. Criminal psychology reminds us that behavior is the most reliable fingerprint, and his patterns speak clearly. The women he chose, the methods he employed, and the concealment he repeated all reveal a figure both meticulous and detached, a predator whose consistency is as chilling as his crimes. Planning defined him. He selected victims from a vulnerable group, aware that their disappearances would draw less urgency. He used burner phones, arranged meetings with caution, and wrapped bodies in burlap with deliberate care. These were not impulsive acts, but rehearsed steps of control. Each detail, transport, concealment, timing, suggested a man staging dominance through order. Beneath the surface of control lies compulsion. Serial predators rarely operate without an inner hunger that drives repetition. For the Gilgo Beach killer, that hunger revealed itself in the repeated targeting of sex workers, a choice reflecting psychological conflict. Desire drew him toward them, yet contempt pushed him to erase them. Many offenders cannot sustain intimacy. Vulnerability feels threatening. In its place, violence becomes the substitute, an act of dominance where connection should exist. Each victim became a mirror of both attraction and shame, and killing served as his twisted resolution to a contradiction he could never reconcile. Psychodynamic theory suggests childhood wounds may have seeded this drive. Neglect, humiliation, or abuse can fracture the capacity for trust. In adulthood, domination then becomes a substitute for connection. Killing does not heal, but offers the illusion of mastery. Each burlap-wrapped body symbolized control over what he feared most: vulnerability. His concealment rituals deepened this narrative. The burlap stripped victims of identity, transforming them into objects. The repetition of this method spoke not only of practicality, but symbolism. He did not discard, he packaged. To him, concealment was not just hiding the body, it was silencing meaning, erasing humanity and preserving control. Why he did it remains the haunting question. Theories range from sexual sadism to revenge, misogyny to dominance. Stoic philosophy frames evil as weakness disguised as strength. The killer may have believed himself powerful, yet his ritualized violence betrayed enslavement to compulsion. His control was not mastery, but surrender. The crime's aftermath stretched beyond the shoreline. Families of victims live with trauma psychology calls ambiguous loss. They received bodies, but not justice, funerals without closure, memories without peace. The lack of resolution suspends grief indefinitely. The killer did not only murder, he corrupted memory. Survivors, parents, siblings, children, carry invisible wounds. Anxiety, distrust, hypervigilance remain constant. For them, the ocean itself feels scarred. Even ordinary sounds, waves, wind, can echo with dread. Trauma rewires the brain to anticipate threat, ensuring the violence reverberates long after the act. Communities, too, absorb trauma. Residents of Long Island confronted the realization that a predator may have lived among them. Sociologists describe this as collective fear, when ordinary places become tainted by suspicion. Suburban streets, once symbols of security, became imagined hunting grounds. Every neighbor could be a suspect, every silence a secret. The unresolved nature of the case magnifies this fear. In theology, confession dissolves secrecy, but here silence reigns. No admission, no clarity. Families are denied closure. Evil lingers not only in the murders, but in the absence of truth. Modern forensics offers new hope. Genetic genealogy, which has cracked other cold cases, may identify the killer through distant relatives. Advanced DNA techniques can recover profiles from degraded remains. Digital forensics may reveal patterns in old phone records once thought too blurred. The past can still yield answers. Yet forensics solves who, not why. Why would a man, possibly with a family, a job, and normal routines, dedicate his nights to predation? Why the need to strip others of identity, to reduce life to object? Why was his existence tied to erasure? These questions exceed evidence, falling into psychology and philosophy. Different traditions offer frames. Buddhism would see craving and delusion at work, attachments so corrosive they destroyed compassion. Confucian thought would view him as a rupture of moral duty, eroding harmony at its root. Stoicism would brand him a slave to passion, failing to anchor in virtue. Psychology reminds us not only of the killer's profile, but of resilience. Families have spoken, organized vigils, and demanded accountability. Their persistence is both survival and defiance. He sought to erase, but their voices reject disappearance. In their advocacy lies a form of justice, however incomplete. Trauma psychology emphasizes the need for meaning in healing. Without it, survivors remain suspended. For Gilgo Beach families, meaning is deferred, tangled in uncertainty. Each headline reopens wounds, each silence renews absence. Yet rituals of remembrance, vigils, marches, names spoken aloud, assert humanity against the anonymity imposed by the killer. Community response reveals paradox. Though fractured by fear, Long Island also found solidarity. Evil's attempt to divide inadvertently created unity. Grief became protest, memory became resistance. The killer's silence echoes, but so do the voices that refuse to be silenced. Still, the question of motive lingers. Was he seeking dominance or fleeing weakness? Were the killings acts of rage or rituals of control? Perhaps he could not explain himself. Many offenders confess not to understanding their own compulsion, describing themselves as passengers inside obsession. This ambiguity ensures the haunting remains. The victims rest, but the story does not. The silence surrounding the killer reverberates louder than any scream. Families are caught between grief and justice, communities between suspicion and safety, investigators between fragments and uncertainty. The case is not simply unsolved, it is unfinished. Psychological insight into Gilgo Beach reveals less about one man than about human fragility. Evil, stripped of spectacle, is not grand but banal. the refusal to see others as human, the surrender to impulse, the silence that follows. The mystery is not only who committed these murders, but why the human heart carries such capacity for destruction. Gilgo Beach stands as a grim reminder that horror does not always wear a mask or announce itself in chaos. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, woven into the lives of neighbors, disguised by routine. The murders here reveal not only the cruelty of one unknown hand, but also the fragility of trust, the ease with which safety can collapse. The lesson left behind is subtle but unshakable. Evil thrives in silence. Communities that turn away, institutions that dismiss warning signs, and individuals who ignore their instincts all contribute to the space where predators endure. Gilgo Beach whispers that vigilance is not paranoia but survival. As we close this chapter, ask yourself, if darkness could take root here, what shadows might linger in the places we call safe? If you found value in this story, remember to like, share the video, and subscribe for more explorations into the criminal mind. Some crimes leave no screams, only questions, and some silences echo louder than any confession. Thank you for listening to Criminal Mindcast.
References 1. Gannon, K. 2020. The Long Island Serial Killer Case. New York, HarperCollins. Explores the Gilgo Beach murders and unsolved cold cases. Point 2. Davis, M. 2018. Unsolved Mysteries of America. Boston, Beacon Press. Covers forgotten evidence, police errors, and lingering trauma in serial killings.